So I took responsibility. I stopped being the victim. I stopped blaming my enabling family members, my slow metabolism, my bad genetics, and I took full ownership. I did the exact opposite of what most people think you need to do to increase your diversity in the gut. But my diversity score actually improved after 90 days of carnivore. I rarely get any flare-ups these days. Carnivore has played a huge piece there. There's a new classification of toxins called diabetogens, which are toxins that actually disrupt the beta cells in our pancreas, which impacts its ability to produce insulin, which can lead to prediabetes and even trigger full-on diabetes.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly. Well, let's get going. Well, welcome, everybody. We have with us today the Ben Azadi. Ben, it's nice to chat with you again. We had a discussion amongst ourselves on your channel a couple weeks back, and thanks for doing that. So you are, correct me if I'm wrong, you were down there in Florida.
Down here in Miami, Florida. Sunny Miami.
My snowman is still holding strong as it's 19 degrees this morning. It's kind of funny. My wife is afraid to drive down the hill, and she goes to work really early. So I got up super early this morning to drive. I have to drive her up and down. It's kind of hilarious because.
Oh wow! Yeah, anyway, we don't have that issue here.
No, you don't have hills in Florida. That's another issue.
Yeah, it's very flat. I mean, that's kind of boring without the hills.
That's the only thing about Florida. It's beach is awesome, nice weather, but there's no hills. So run hills is tough. For those who don't know who you are, how did you get into the sort of Keto Kamp, keto, low carb, nutrition, health space? Where did that originate from?
Yeah, so it originated, Shawn, back in the early 2000s, 2007. I was 23 years old and I was obese, physically obese, mentally obese. That was pretty much my entire life growing up as a kid. I was the kid that was overweight, picked on, really unhealthy lifestyle. My mom worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken as a manager, so she brought home good old Kentucky Fried Chicken fried in some seed oils, and I would eat that. So as an adult, I found myself 23 years old, 250 pounds, physically obese, but also depressed and also suicidal, mental illness, looking for ways to end my life. And I explored that too. And the reason I didn't go through with it is because I didn't want to do that to my mom. I didn't want to harm her, and I didn't want her to cause her to be depressed and sad from her son taking his own life. So it stopped me from doing that. But I knew I had to make a change. I knew that my health was deteriorating. I had low back pain, prediabetes, high blood pressure, brain fog. I felt like my body was on fire from the inflammation. I could barely walk for more than an hour without my back and knees hurting me. And it first started with getting into more of the mental side in terms of self-development. I started reading books from authors like Bob Proctor, Tony Robbins, Dr. Wayne Dyer, and it really helped change my mindset and the self-image I had of myself and my health. Then I decided to take responsibility, which I believe is the first step to great change. And it's something that a lot of people lack, is that responsibility. So I took responsibility. I stopped being the victim. I stopped blaming my enabling family members, my slow metabolism, my bad genetics, and I took full ownership. And I started to exercise, just focused at first on just eating foods that had minimal amount of ingredients. And I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 250 pounds total to as low as 170 pounds, 34% body fat to as low as 6% body fat. And that's what got me into the health space. At that point, this is 2008 now, I became a body personal trainer, and I started training clients for many years. I eventually opened up a CrossFit gym here in Miami, which I operated for about 5 years. Around 2013, Shawn, is when my health started to also kind of go downwards, where I was starting to experience like hormonal issues, more brain fog, the weight was starting to come back. And I explored at first a vegan diet. That's the first thing I did. I read the China study, not knowing how to read studies and distinguish between good studies and bad studies. The book totally fooled me into thinking like a plant-based diet was the way to go. And I did it for a year and a half, and it made things worse. And then I started to get in or research ketosis and intermittent fasting. Now this is 2014. And it made a lot of sense to me. It made a lot of sense to me that we're designed to burn fat. It's our primal birthright. There's nothing new about ketosis. It's not a diet. It's a metabolic process. And fasting is a great way to get into ketosis. And I went full in with keto and fasting back in 2014. And it made a huge difference for me. And I started to teach it to my community. And that's where it all started. And in 2018 is when I rebranded and started educating, really focused on keto, low carb, and eventually carnivore as it has evolved over the years. But that was a starting point, my own pain to purpose story.
I guess I didn't know you were used to be 250 because I've only known you've been pretty relatively, normal,
Yes.
thin guy. So, I mean, you certainly, that's surprising. Occasionally I get surprised. Somebody will walk up to me and they'll say, I used to weigh 450 pounds, and they're completely normal. And it's usually one of these stores where they, often went on a low carb ketogenic carnivore diet or something like that. It's interesting. I just saw a sort of a statistic that for the first time since they've been recording, people in the UK, Sweden, and other places are intentionally increasing their meat consumption in an effort to improve their health. So many years we've been sold that plant-based sort of lie in many ways, or con, you might say, that a lot of people fell for. I fortunately never went down that road. I don't know, just for whatever reason, I'd eaten some vegan patties and stuff back in the day. I tried some of these. I never liked them. I was like, it's not very good, but I thought I was doing good, but I never went full vegan, like they said, never go full, whatever it might be. So you obviously have adopted like you said, low carb ketogenic and sometimes carnivore approach. I know you did a recent didn't you do a carnivore 90-day thing or something like that recently?
I did. Yeah.
What was the impetus for doing that? And then what were the results?
Yeah, it was a fun experiment. I had been doing carnivore here and there, 45 days straight, 60 days straight, and then I would get off and have some more low carb keto meals and go back to carnivore. But I never did 3 months straight. And I know 3 months compared to you, Shawn, and others in the space, it's not really that long, but it was enough to get some data. So I decided, all right, I have this YouTube channel, I have my Metabolic Freedom podcast. I'm going to get some data to hopefully inspire others to give it a shot. And I know everybody's different. This is my own N of 1 experiment. But I did lab work on day one. I did comprehensive labs with LabCorp, looked at my full thyroid panel, looked at my hormones, testosterone, estrogen, of course. I mentioned the thyroid. I looked at my inflammatory markers. I did a full lipid panel, including the particle sizes, insulin, A1C, CBC. It was a full panel. And I did that day one. I also did a stool test on day one to look at my gut microbiome. I threw on a continuous glucose monitor. I was already wearing my Oura ring, so I was tracking things like deep sleep, REM sleep, total sleep, how many times I'm waking up through the night compared to when I was not in carnivore, HRV, resting heart rate. So I had all these metrics, and also how I felt, and total weight, body fat percentage were also metrics that I tracked. And then I did 90 straight days, and that was my longest to that point of doing carnivore, 90 straight days.
What were you eating just prior to, so we get an idea of what
yeah, good
shifting?
question. So I was mostly keto, with the exception of Saturdays and Sundays. I'd flex out and have more 200 grams of carbs on those days from Whole Foods. So I was doing 80% keto, 20% out of ketosis prior to the carnivore experiment. So I was eating pretty clean. I mean, no seed oils, no gluten.
Okay, so not a bunch of junk. So it was a pretty low carb diet with a little bit of carb refeeds on the weekend or something like that.
Correct. That's what I was doing for years prior to this 90 days.
So you had a pretty comprehensive panel of all kinds of stuff that you had insight in. So what were the highlights, lowlights, unexpected or expected things you saw?
Yeah. So on day 90, when I retested and I got the results back with the labs, my labs looked pretty good on day one because I was already eating a clean approach. My total cholesterol was around 350 on day one. Total. Okay. And then on day 90, it went up to 450. It jumped up 100 points. My total LDL was 250 on day one, and it went up to 350 on day 90. So that also...
Did you lose any weight during this?
I did, and I didn't expect that I would. I lost 16 pounds, actually.
16? Yeah,
16.
Okay, so this lean mass lipid energy model, again, we're seeing leaner.
Exactly.
Okay, got you. Okay.
That's exactly what happened to me. All right. So I lost 16 pounds, 16. I also dropped about 6% body fat. I didn't know that my body needed to do that, but eventually, apparently it did. And my markers look good. The cholesterol went up, but my lipids, the LDL particles I got done. I got the NMR profile done looking at the different particle sizes. And the majority of my LDL particles were the pattern A, the large fluffy variety, which we know is safe, protective, great for the immune system. I had a very small amount of the pattern B, small particles for my LDL. On top of that, HDL was above 60 both times. Triglycerides were below 70 both times. My A1C went from 5.2 to 5.1. My C-reactive protein was 0.4, and it kind of stayed there on day 90. Homocysteine went from 10 to, I believe, 7 or 8. So that dropped a little bit into the single digits. Fasting insulin was 3.3 on day 1, 3.2 on day 90. So when we looked at like the full picture here, it really, I was at low risk of heart disease on day 1 and even lower risk on day 90 after doing this experiment. But the most interesting thing here with the experiment was the stool test.
Yeah.
When I did the gut test, my results came back within a few weeks into the experiment, and it showed I had average diversity, some of the bacteria relationships that said could be improved. And the lab report suggested less of a ketogenic diet, less red meat, more polyphenols, more fiber, more plants, more vegetables to increase diversity. And of course, I did the complete opposite. And on day 90, when I retested, most people would think, okay, my results should have plummeted because I did the exact opposite of what most people think you need to do to increase your diversity in the gut. But my diversity score actually improved after 90 days of carnivore. I had developed 5 keystone bacteria on day 5 that did not show up on day 1, 7 core bacteria that showed up on day 7 that was not day 90 that did not show up on day 1. And it was the complete opposite, right? You talk about this metabolic flexibility of the gut. That's exactly what happened to me. And on top of all of that, I also felt great. My HRV went up. My heart rate variability went up. Deep sleep improved. REM sleep improved. I was getting up less times throughout the night. I was recovering in between workouts much faster. So, man, it was super healing for my body. It was amazing for me.
So, yeah, this is the interesting thing, the gut microbiome, because, we're often told we need fiber to feed these so-called, healthy bacteria that maintain our gut lining integrity and health. And we need all this diversity. And then when you go carnivore, and you certainly aren't the first one I've seen that have done this test and shown this. In fact, there's a case report published in the literature now on this exact same issue where, they took a bunch of people and they had a carnivore in there and his gut diversity was equal or better than most of them. And so I think we're starting to debunk some of these myths around the negative aspects of a carnivore diet, which just don't seem to show up. And your gut feeling probably, I assume, was good too. I mean, is that a fair statement? I
had no gas at all. I don't tend to be a gassy person, but I'll get cyclical gas when I'm eating more carbohydrates and vegetables. I don't even think I had any gas the entire 90 days on carnivore, which my fiance definitely appreciated.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's I think a New York Post or somebody, the steak and butter gal got on there and she said, I don't fart. And of course, that's always is funny, is comical. So I just reposted and asked people, because that's what I've seen. I've seen a dramatic reduction in gas output when you don't have fermentable food in your gut. You just don't produce as much gas. You don't fart as much. Maybe not completely eliminated, but 90-95% reduced. And, it's gotten because it's goofy, it's got 100,000 views now just in the course of 2 hours. And I put it up there and everybody's saying the same thing. My gas has gone down. I don't fart as much. I fart almost never, type of stuff. And there's actually scientific studies on this showing that, fiber increases gas production by some ridiculous order of magnitude. So let me ask you, when you said you did a carnivore diet for 90 days, what did that look like for you? Was it strictly meat and water, or was it eggs, dairy? How did you incorporate that?
It was meat, red meat, beef and lamb. I also had seafood, wild caught salmon. I had sheep and goat dairy and eggs. I also did have my coffee. I made the exception with the coffee. That was probably the only thing. But yeah, it was a little bit more flexible than traditional, strict, just beef and salt carnivore diet. But it was all animal products with the exception of the coffee.
Yeah, and if when I wrote the book, The Carnivore Diet, that was included in there. Right? It was when you look at that, what is carnivore? Because there's a lot of discourse about, is honey carnivore, is fruit carnivore, and no, it's not. I mean, and again, it's not that those things are necessarily off limits to everybody. I mean, it's like you can eat whatever you want. But if you call it a carnivore, it sort of dilutes it and kind of confuses the message. So I try to say, let's have a definition and not say this is the only way you can eat, but this is what this means. This is like saying I'm on a ketogenic diet and I'm eating, 500 grams of carbs every day. No, you're not. I mean, there's a point of having some definitions here.
I agree.
Downsides of the carnivore experience, 90 days. Were there any big negatives that you could take home? Some people will have a gut transitionary period, but anything you had?
Yeah, there were a few things. There was my gut microbiome did adapt to it, and some of the things that I experienced were cyclical diarrhea and loose stools. Didn't last very long, and I noticed because here's the thing: when I do carnivore, I'm so full and satiated, and I tend to do 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, and I'll have a pretty big meal of like protein and fat. And in the beginning, my liver was not adapting to producing enough bile to break down the fat. So by just having smaller meals, maybe 3 or 4, and spreading them out and giving my liver some time to adapt and adjust to the bile production helped with that. Some people need to take exogenous ox bile to help break that down. It's not always necessary. That was one thing. So cyclical diarrhea and loose stools, but it didn't last very long. I did the experiment October 1st through January, and that's through the holidays. So, it could be a little socially restrictive when you go to a Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner. My mom still does not understand what the carnivore diet is. I'll show up for dinner and she's like, but can you have lentils? What about the salad? So, having those conversations and setting boundaries, and I stood strong and I didn't break the carnivore. And I think that's important to believe in what you're doing and have those conversations and not let the peer pressure get to you. If your family really wants you to be healthy and feel good, they should be on board. So that could be a little bit of a challenge, especially during the holidays. And I found that, but I had those conversations. Other than that, Shawn, no, there were no other challenges with carnivore. I felt incredible. It helped me just maximize my health and feel incredible. So no, those are the only 2 things I noticed.
Yeah, because obviously you said I didn't realize you had a CrossFit gym. Are you still doing a lot of exercise type stuff? Is that something because you obviously are, nutrition is one aspect of health. It's a very important aspect and a critical aspect. If you don't get that right, everything else kind of falls apart. But there are a lot of things that go into just, living a healthy life. What are some of the other things that you sort of are interested in?
Yeah, for sure. Fitness. That's a big goal of mine this year is to put on a lot more lean muscle mass. I'm on a strength training plan right now, and I'll train 3 to 4 times a week. Not necessarily CrossFit type workouts anymore. I'm not doing WODs and all that, but I am doing functional lifts. I have a garage gym here at my house, and I'll lift, and I play a lot of basketball as well. So there's some sprinting, some burst training involved there. I do believe in muscle mass as you do as well, obviously. And one of my goals is to put on a lot of lean muscle, about 10, 15 pounds of lean muscle this year. For me, it's always been more of a challenge being an ectomorph build to put on lean muscle mass. So some of the things that I've incorporated is hitting my protein target, getting my creatine and essential amino acids, and then making sure I push myself when I train, but also recover the right way and listen to my body. So yes, for me, I think fitness is really important, something that I'm working on. I know that I feel so much better when I'm consistently lifting weights and training like you do. I see your videos, Shawn, you eat steak, you go lift, you do your heavy deadlift. So I do something similar, just not as high volume as you, but I am progressing. And that's something that I'm working on for sure this year.
When you say when you hit your protein targets, what are those targets for you? Like body weight goal, like per body weight, what are you trying to consume?
On the days that I strength train, my goal is to get 1 gram of protein per pound of my ideal body weight, which for me, my ideal body weight, I'm around 175. I want to be around 185 at least. So I'm on the strength training days, I'm looking to get 185 grams of protein. Sometimes I'll hit it. Sometimes I'll fill in the gaps with like essential amino acids, and I'll get around 5 to 7 grams of creatine from supplementation on those days as well.
Yeah, this is something that is kind of a recent phenomenon with the creatine. Obviously, creatine has been on the market since, gosh, I think I want to say late 80s. I'm trying to wonder when creatine really first came out. Certainly by the early 90s. I remember when I first started taking it years ago. I remember I went from bench pressing like 225 for like 20 reps to, I think I got it to 24 reps. I mean, that was back when I used to do a lot of bench pressing. It'd be kind of an average NFL combine type of thing these days. But I was probably in my, I don't know, early 30s, late 20s when I was doing that stuff. And then creatine was always thought of as a sports supplement. It'll make you a little bit stronger. It might make you retain a little more water in your muscles, on and on. Maybe that was a mechanism. But in recent times, there's been a lot of literature that shows it protects the heart, it's good for brain health. What have you discovered, or if you have any knowledge around creatine's efficacy for things, and why are you taking more of it? Is it primarily for muscle building, or is it for other reasons?
Yeah, all the reasons you mentioned, right? Because you mentioned the heart and the brain. Well, what those organs have in common, they're very metabolically active and are loaded with mitochondria. So it does have a role, influence on mitochondrial health, which is always a goal of mine. I have noticed when I take creatine consistently that I do perform better with my strength training workouts, and I recover much better as well. So there's a lot of research, as you mentioned, for many years on creatine, thousands of studies out there. So for me, I'm aiming to get 5 to 7 grams, actually not just on my strength training days. I do that on a daily basis. I'm getting about 5 to 7 grams every single day of creatine. If I take some time off because I forget or I run out, then I would notice a difference in terms of my recovery in between workouts. So personally, I'm a fan of it. It's one of those supplements that I believe is safe in terms of the research. It's not expensive as well. And of course, we could get creatine from red meat and foods, and that is ideal. But I personally like to supplement with it. I feel good with it.
Yeah, I mean, initially when creatine first came out, there was like a loading dose. It was like 3 to 5 grams, and you would take, I can't remember whether it was like 1 gram or 2 grams a day or something like that. And now there's people talking about, maybe 15 to 20 grams of a loading dose, and then these higher amounts. And certainly, as you correctly point out, creatine is found in red meat, although you got to eat quite a bit of it to get that amount. Although the question is, I mean, there's a lot of other variables that go into this. Also, I mean, it's interesting because there's other obviously products in red meat, carnosine, carnitine, which also have been used as supplements, also having decent efficacy. So it's interesting that these effective supplements are found already in red meat, at least to some degree.
Right.
What about, so you're exercising, obviously I assume you're wearing these blue blocking type glasses or something like that. Talk to me about light and circadian biology, if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, so I have a new book coming out, Shawn, in May 13th of 2025 with Hay House. It's called Metabolic Freedom, and it's pretty much all about the metabolism, why most Americans, about 93% of Americans, as you teach and share, are metabolically unhealthy. And the first half of the book discusses the main causes of metabolic disease, and the second half gets into the solutions. And at the end of the book, there's a 30-day metabolic freedom reset, a plan to achieve metabolic health within 30 days, or at least get there as close as possible within 30 days. So one of those chapters in the beginning in terms of the problem is this circadian rhythm mismatch, artificial light, junk light. And we know that there's blue light from the sun, and there are blue light from these artificial lights I have in my room here, but it's a very different type of blue light when it comes from fluorescent lights or these bulbs here in front of me versus the sun. This is artificial, what's called junk light. And it, of course, increases cortisol. Our brain needs to filter out artificial light. So I have found when I wear blue light blocking glasses, these are not prescription, I see perfectly, but I wear these when I'm around a computer for several hours a day, like today. I have found that it allows the lenses to filter out the junk light where my brain and body doesn't have to filter out the junk light. And the analogy I always give about this, I think I wrote about this in the book, is a Google Chrome browser. Like I'm using Google Chrome here. And if you're like me, Shawn, after just like a week of opening up a new browser, I get like 30, 50, 100 tabs open. It just happens so quickly. You're like studying something and all of a sudden my computer starts to work slowly. It starts to freeze because I have all these tabs open. It's kind of like what's happening when your brain has to filter out all the junk light when you're around junk light every single day. by putting on something like blue light blocking glasses that filter out the junk light, I have found that it's kind of like taking 100 tabs open on your computer to 5 tabs. You start to function better. When I don't wear the glasses and I'm around light, artificial light for 5 hours, 8 hours, at the end of the day, my brain feels a little fatigued. But when I wear that, I don't have that problem. And we're not designed to be around this artificial light all day long, especially at night. We know it disrupts our sleep. We know that cortisol and melatonin have this inverted relationship. When you spike cortisol at night, you deplete melatonin. Melatonin is not just a hormone or antioxidant for sleep. It's also a very powerful antioxidant for our mitochondria. It's a great way to buffer stress. Every cell in the body, with the exception of the red blood cells, make melatonin because every mitochondria actually makes melatonin. And when we are exposed to artificial light, especially at night, it disrupts our circadian rhythm where we don't get deep restorative sleep. And we know this, Shawn, when you are getting poor sleep, there's studies that show just 1 week of poor sleep categorized by 5 hours or less in healthy men. When they did their labs, they showed that they mimicked someone that was pre-diabetic just from poor sleep. So it disrupts our circadian rhythm. I love getting out in the sunshine. It's easy for me to do in Miami, but when I'm inside for a long period of time, I'm wearing these blue light blocking glasses. And I know that there are trolls on social media that say once you see the glasses, blue, they do the little blue cap and they don't trust you. And there's a lot of BS and woo-woo behind it. But I get that. But for me, I notice a difference. And I do like some of the studies that back it up as well.
Hey, folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you use them because I've seen you in person. You've got like at different conferences, and it's certainly. I mean, I think there's a plethora of data showing that light impacts us, and as you know, the day-night sleep-wake cycle is very much dependent upon light triggers, and seeing that red light spectrum at night sets up the melatonin so that we sleep better, and then as you mentioned, sleep is also a critical. I think sleep and nutrition, and then I think activity are kind of our 3 big primary pillars. Stress management might be up in there. I don't know if you go into that book much about stress. Is that do you touch on that at all and mitigation strategies for that? And if so, maybe you can discuss that. I'm not sure if you did or not.
I do. Yeah, I do. Because like you said, that's also foundational, right? And we know stress. I get into hormesis in the book, and that's good stress. We know there's this principle called hormesis. When you stress a human being with the right type of stress, the right duration and amount of stress, the human being, the body adapts and gets stronger and healthier. You stay in what's called this hormetic zone. But if that stress is too much, you fall out of this hormetic zone and all of a sudden become inflamed. And that, I discuss it in the context of biohacking in the book. Being in the biohacking space, I see a lot of people who violate hormesis, who don't understand hormesis. They'll do excessive cold plunging, sauna, red light. And I love all that stuff. But if you're so inflamed, your mitochondria unhealthy or you're metabolically unhealthy, and you say, I'm going to do a 5-minute cold plunge because I saw, Ben Greenfield do it for 5 minutes or whatever it is, you're going to feel worse, not better. You violated hormesis. So stress is actually vital for longevity, for fat loss, for performance, as long as you adapt to the stress. And what all these biohacks have in common, they stress the body. PEMF, red light therapy, exercise, fasting, these are all stressors. They're not bad unless you do too much and you don't adapt to it. Now, if you're not adapting to it, here are some of the things I talk about in the book to pay attention to. How do you feel the rest of the day? Like if you did a cold plunge or a sauna or a workout, you should feel more energized and better the rest of the day, not depleted. You should get better sleep. You should see your heart rate variability increase. If you see the opposite, you did too much, and it's unique to us. It's unique to the individual. Everybody has a different hormetic ceiling. I have found that one of the best ways to raise your hormetic ceiling to adapt to the stress is to strategically apply short stressors and increase that stressor and adapt to it. I'll give you an example, Shawn. I have Raynaud syndrome. I think we discussed this on my podcast. And Raynaud's syndrome, for those who don't know, it's an autoimmune condition. I actually have a unique variation of autoimmune disease. It's Raynaud's syndrome and another autoimmune called erythromyalgia. Both of them are pretty rare, and it's really rare to have both to get at the same time because they're both kind of opposing pathways. Raynaud's syndrome is where you don't get enough blood flow to your extremities. And what happens is it creates vasoconstriction, but also lack of blood flow and oxygen to your extremities means when I touch something cold, let's say I'm holding a can of something, a cold beverage, or jumping into a cold body of water, all of a sudden all this blood flow goes away from my fingers. In my case, some people it's in their toes, but for me, my fingers, and then it gets white and blue, and I can actually see the blood flow going away. Erythromyalgia is kind of excessive blood flow and inflammation and hot hands. And what was happening to me was that when I was exposed to cold, I would get a flare-up for Raynaud's. When I would eat food, anything, I would activate erythromyalgia. My hands would turn red and it would be inflamed. Really rare to have both. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because in 2018, when I did not understand good stress and hormesis and did not understand my stress bucket was really high, I did a cold plunge, jumping into a cold body of water in actually not too far from you, a mountain by Seattle, Washington. I think it was called Snow Lake Mountain. Mike Mutzel had recommended it. I forget the name of the mountain, but I jumped into this cold body of water for 10, 15 minutes. 10, 15 seconds. I get out of the body of water and I look at my fingers, completely white all the way into my wrist. I couldn't even close my hands. They were stuck. And I thought I was going to lose my fingers. It was pretty scary. I was only with a couple of friends. Nobody else was around. So I was looking for people that were hiking. Thank God I found some hikers. I asked them if they had a lighter. They did. So I was holding up this lighter underneath my fingers until it started to get back the blood flow. And I realized that I did too much. So now fast forward, ever since that happened, I removed the 8 silver fillings I had in my mouth, which was causing mercury to go in my brain, inflammation. I was living in a moldy home that I got out of and detoxed the mold. That helped. And I've been doing all these different things for metabolic health. And now I have a cold plunge, and I could cold plunge for 4 minutes, 39 degrees Fahrenheit, no flare up. I feel great, right? So that's an example of me increasing my hormetic ceiling and using stress to work for me, not against me. And I think, Shawn, a lot of people in our space might talk about hormesis, especially the biohacking space, but I don't think they really understand it, or they don't really educate their community to really adapt to the stress.
Yeah, it's an interesting, because you talk about raising ceilings, and as I'm an old, I think you're in your like early 40s, if I did the math right.
I turned 40 a few months ago.
Yeah, so early, and I'm almost soon hit 60 here, and I find that maintaining a high ceiling of capacity is important now, and I think touching those things fairly frequently, but again with smaller doses, and so microdosing, high intensity, just so you maintain that capacity is very good. I'm specifically talking about in regard to like sprinting, jumping, lifting heavy, those types of things, and maintaining those things. And then some of these other things are also, important. But yeah, I do think you see people that overdo it when it comes to exercise. They overdo it when it comes to some of the biohacking stuff there. I mean, you look at some of the folks and you listen to their routine, it's like, are you spending like 6 hours a day biohacking? I mean, some of it's passive, but I mean, some of it's active. They're like actively, and it's like, that would exhaust me. I couldn't, when do you like live?
I see it all the time, bro. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you listen to some of the people on social media, like that's not, they're just making this stuff up, or they can't be, they do it one time and then they pretend like it's part of their daily ritual. Miami is obviously, got some advantages when it comes to sunshine and weather and warmth and all that stuff. And I'm as my snowman is hanging tight. I built him on. Actually, I had the first snowman I built in I've been probably 40-some years. My kid wanted to build a snowman, so we built it. We made it structurally big. I was like, we got to have it big because it's going to last. And the weather's cooperated in that but as much as I like having the snowman out there, I sure as hell would rather have warm weather, sunshine, and so I can get out there and play. What was it? did you move to Miami because of the Raynaud's syndrome, or has it become a I don't know, an area for people seeking health and fitness? I mean, you always hear about old people moving down to Florida. These old people from New York, they get tired of cold weather. Is that what drove you down there, the weather, or was there some other reason to live down there?
No, I'm a rare case, Shawn. I'm actually born and raised here. So thankfully for my Raynaud's, I'm born and raised here. But, I could say this with Raynaud's and autoimmune in general, I rarely get any flare-ups these days from my Raynaud's or from my erythromyalgia. Carnivore has played a huge piece there. We know how incredible Carnivore is for autoimmune conditions. A lot of people who are suffering with autoimmune have intestinal permeability, in other words, leaky gut. They're creating this hyper-vigilant immune response to undigested food because they have leaky gut because of plant toxins and other toxins, of course. So with Carnivore, you get to repair the gut. I remember when I first did Carnivore, 2019. At this time, I was getting frequent Raynaud's flare-ups and erythromyalgia flare-ups. And sometimes with the erythromyalgia, and it usually happened after I would eat a meal and I would go walk my dog outside, it would just feel like my fingers were so inflamed. It was really uncomfortable. I'd walk around holding something cold to combat that. Sometimes I would lie down in bed at night and I couldn't fall asleep because my fingers were so inflamed and I would have to go to sleep with an ice pack. The first time I did Carnivore in 2019, I did it 40 straight days. I had no flare-ups. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could live my life like this without any flare-ups. Now, fast forward, I've done so many things for my health that I rarely get a flare-up from either erythromyalgia or my Raynaud's. And I share that to give people hope. I mean, just because you have an autoimmune condition or diabetes, type 2, whatever it doesn't mean you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. These are genes that are triggered by your lifestyle, by your environment, and you could turn off those genes. Your body is so incredible. It could heal itself. I have seen it firsthand with myself and thousands of students. This is not something that you live with for the rest of your life. So man, if you do the right things, your body will heal itself. And I'm happy to say I am living almost symptom-free with my autoimmune conditions, and it feels damn good. And if I could do it, anybody could do it, because I was really inflamed. I was dealing with a lot of stress and environmental toxins and just bad nutrition. So if I could do it, I think your audience could do it as well.
One of the, obviously we all, I think, appreciate the advantage of living in a technologically advanced society. We don't have to sleep outside and freeze to death and get eaten by mosquitoes. And, there's some good things about tech. You can fly across the world, you can drive to the grocery store, whatever. I mean, it's definitely made our life easier, but now we live in a sort of a toxic soup of endocrine receptors and, endocrine disruptors. And now we got microplastics in our brain. How do we mitigate some of that? Or do you have any things, is that something you have an interest in or ways to combat some of that stuff?
Huge interest in, Shawn, huge interest. When I started getting mentored by Dr. Daniel Pompa, who you've had on your podcast in 2018, he brought a lot of awareness to me about environmental toxins. He was the one who helped me discover the reason why I was so inflamed was because of 8 silver fillings in my mouth that was leaching mercury into my brain and the mold in my home. So, and ever since then, our toxic load has increased. We live in the most toxic world than ever before. There's a whole chapter in Metabolic Freedom all about how environmental toxins disrupt our metabolism. We know that they're called obesogens for a reason. When these toxins enter our body through our food supply, water supply, just breathing it in, our chemicals from our detergents or cleaning supplies, the body wants to survive. The number one priority for the human body, the innate intelligence, is survival. So it activates a pathway, PPAR gamma, which I talk about in the book. And that pathway is designed to shuttle these toxins out of the bloodstream because the body does not want these toxins to kill you right away and enter your vital organs. So it activates PPAR gamma to shuttle them where? Into our adipocytes, into our fat cells, because there's a lot of room there. And the solution to pollution is dilution. So the metabolism, the innate intelligence, could actually increase our fat cells for these toxins to go and even create new fat cells for these toxins to live in. And that's how they make us sick and inflamed and fat and obese. That's one classification of toxins. There's a new classification of toxins called diabetogens, which are toxins that actually disrupt the beta cells in our pancreas, which impacts its ability to produce insulin, which can lead to pre-diabetes and even trigger full-on diabetes. So some low-hanging fruit things that I talk about in the book when it comes to these toxins is, number one, do an audit on your environment, right? You mentioned plastics, Shawn. There are microplastics, as you mentioned, found in our brains, men's testicles, throughout our body. We know that University of Newcastle study that I referenced in the book showed that the average American consumes around 5 grams worth of plastic every week, which is the amount of a credit card. So we want to limit our plastic exposure. How do you do that? Well, you can see here on my desk. Well, for those listening, you can't see it, but I drink out of glass bottles as much as possible. In my house, I do not use a plastic cutting board. I use a solid wood cutting board because plastic cutting boards will leach microplastics into your food. I do not use any plastic Tupperware. It's all glass. And I make sure when I am traveling, I find glass or stainless steel or take stainless steel components with me as much as possible to avoid plastic. That's one thing. There's also BPA. And we know BPA, biphenyl A, is found in canned food, yes. But there's also a study that I referenced in the book that showed that cash register receipts contain 250 to 500 times greater BPA, greater amounts of BPA in a cash register receipt than what's found in canned food. So simple thing, say no to cash register receipts. I see so many people at Whole Foods grab it, women put it in their bra, people put it in their pocket. You're being exposed to toxins. So say no to cash register receipts. And at the end of the day, we can't avoid these toxins, like you mentioned. We're not going to live in the middle of the woods. We're not going to, be Paul Saladino. We're going to have to open up our detox pathways. We want to do things like moving the body is one of the best things you can do. It moves your lymphatic system. It moves things around, making sure you're getting quality sleep. When you're sleeping, you're detoxing, you're repairing. So not eating too close to bed, not getting the artificial light before bed, getting quality sleep, keep those detox pathways open. I'm telling you, these toxins are everywhere. The obesogens, the diabetogens, and this is low-hanging fruit stuff. I'm not even talking about super toxins, right? Glyphosate. We know in America, Shawn, glyphosate is everywhere. It's in a high percentage. I forget what the percentage is. 90% plus of people are urinating glyphosate. And Europe, Italy, they banned glyphosate in 2016. Well, it's really no coincidence that they also have a fraction of the obesity, a fraction of the diabetes, and they've banned glyphosate. They banned artificial ingredients like red dye, and we didn't, at least right now. It's looking like we're going to be doing something about it. So, Shawn, to your point, we need to avoid as much as possible these environmental toxins, swap out your chemical-laden detergents and artificial chemical ingredients that are cleaning supplies with natural stuff. This all goes a long way.
Yeah, your point is, we all are going to be, it's just like the processed food stuff. You've got to figure out how to deal with it. It's not going to go, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden Snickers bars are going to be off the planet Earth. Some people would certainly bemoan that fact if it ever came to the case.
Sure.
But, so you have to figure out how to adapt to this sort of thing. And I think your point about, you can, there's things within reason you can do. This is a glass bottle. I similar. It's a simple things that aren't inconvenient are no brainers. Now there are things that are like, am I going to go out of my way to never touch anything plastic the rest of my life? Life would be very challenging. You grab the steering wheel on your car. I suspect it's got, I don't know, it's plastic, leather, vinyl. I don't know what it is, but probably most of it's plastic. So, you got to figure out, okay, there's a practical, so like the air particles, I imagine just breathing air, there's probably microplastics in the air that we're going to have to be exposed to. So, yeah, some of it's like, I guess you could move to the mountains of Tibet and maybe escape some of that perhaps, but it's not practical for the majority of it. So what about, you mentioned hormesis. There are some people that intentionally cold exposure, sauna. I've seen, a lot of, cold exposure, cold plunging was really popular. It's still fairly popular, although it's kind of maybe lost some of its luster for some folks. Sauna, however, seems to be remaining quite popular. Any thoughts on the sauna side of things?
Yeah, Shawn, I love sauna. That's the one thing that I do more frequently than any other of the biohacks if you want to call it that. I have a cold plunge. I have an infrared sauna here as well. And I find myself doing more sauna than the cold plunge or pretty much any biohacking thing that I have. Sauna is great. Sauna vasodilates our blood vessels. And it's interesting because cold exposure vasoconstricts, where it closes the blood vessels and you get out, opens it up, and there's a lot of benefits there. But sauna vasodilates. So it increases nitric oxide, which we know it's a gaseous molecule that's important to protect the heart. It's also important for blood flow and oxygen delivery, nutrient delivery to cells. So when you go into a sauna, it opens up those blood vessels. You get a nitric oxide boost. It activates heat shock proteins. It increases your body temperature. And there's a lot of research on it. And there's different types of heat exposure. Of course, there's infrared sauna, which is what I have. There's also dry sauna, steam sauna. They're all beneficial. They're all very beneficial. And for me, I personally aim to get about 90 minutes of heat exposure total per week. And I have noticed when I'm getting heat exposure, I feel great. I recover well from my workouts. I get really good deep sleep. My body temperature drops overnight. My resting heart rate drops as well, goes into a nice 44 beats per minute range, which is really good for me. So I love sauna. I think it's a great thing to do consistently. I don't see as many people violating hormesis with sauna as they do with cold plunge. But with that being said, if you're new to sauna, start with maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even less. See how you feel and kind of go from there. I usually do 20 to 30 minute sessions and get enough in a week that equals at least 90 minutes per week. And I personally do it after my workouts. It helps me recover really well. Or on an off day, I'll just get into my sauna and do it. You don't have to buy a sauna. You could go to a place that has it. Heck, you could even take a really hot shower, although it's not the same thing. There are some benefits there. So I love sauna. Shawn, it's one of my favorite things that I do. Do you personally do sauna, Shawn?
Yeah, I have a sauna in my backyard. We built when we put the house in here, and it's I unfortunately I got to march through the snow to get to it right now. But I've actually usually a couple times a week I've been doing it lately, and we kind of go through phases where we do it more or not. I think the interesting thing you mentioned about over hormesing yourself, kind of overstressing yourself with cold. It's harder to do in the sauna because I think the dosage requires a longer period of time. I mean, You go in a cold plunge for a minute and you've got this huge structure. But if you step in the sauna for a minute, not much going to happen. You got to be in there for 10, 15, 20 minutes before you would start to overstress it, I think. And no one's going to walk into a 250 degree sauna. I mean, it's like, you come out medium rare, I think, or medium well or something like that. So, but I mean, you get in there, maybe it's 150, 180, something like that. Is there let me ask you about that. What is it? Because you said infrared, which obviously is not as much heat dependent, but for those of people like the traditional, the Finnish, type of, dry saunas, temperature thoughts on those things, temperature and durations.
The cool thing about infrared is that to your point, it doesn't have to be as hot. I think mine gets as maximum of 167 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty hot, but the infrared lights, it has near infrared, mid infrared, and far infrared. It has all three spectrums of the infrared, helps it penetrate deeper. So it's actually more comfortable while still getting the benefits. Now, dry sauna and steam saunas, those could go over 200, and they're a lot more, they're not as comfortable as an infrared sauna, and you could spend less time in that and get the benefits there. But I think anywhere between 160 degrees Fahrenheit to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, there's going to be benefits. Getting 90 minutes total per week is what I personally like to do, whether it's infrared, dry, or steam sauna. But if you're looking for a more comfortable experience, then I would go with infrared because it doesn't get as hot, yet there's still a lot of benefits to it.
Do you find it's necessary to sweat to get the benefit? Do you want to bring to a point where you start sweating?
I do. I mean, there's going to be benefits even if you don't sweat, but I like to sweat. I like to get in there, I like to sweat. And I personally like to sweat and then dry myself off and sweat, dry myself off, sometimes get outside, wipe myself off and go back inside. I do personally like to sweat. I like the feeling of it. I like the fact that my body is getting rid of some toxins through my sweat. And you don't have to sweat to get the benefits though, because I know that with my sauna, there is a preheating period. I have a sauna from Sunlighten. It's M-Pulse, it's called. And there's like an hour of preheating, and there's still benefits being in there during the preheating, even if you're not sweating. So you don't have to sweat for the benefits, but I prefer it personally.
Yeah, there's certainly, that aspect of it's almost like another workout. It's like a free workout. You just sit there and sweat. And I think some of the same things happen. I mean, you're raising your heart rate goes up, you sweat, you're vasodilating, some of the same things you get with exercise. Do you find that, are you a fan of the contrast therapy? So I know a lot of people will sauna, cold plunge. Is that something you play with?
I like that. Yeah. And I feel incredible when I do it. Now, I don't do it as often because from what I've researched, Shawn, cold plunging is better to do before a workout, not after. You want to kind of cool down to warm up. You want to get cold and then go work out. You don't want to cold plunge after a workout. And that makes sense because when you work out, you're creating some inflammatory responses. Your body has to deal with that inflammation. You get stronger and better. If you go into a cold plunge after a workout, which a lot of people do, you kind of blunt the body's natural ability to heal itself from the workout. So I typically plunge and then work out. And then I like to do the sauna after the workout. So I'm not adding the plunge at that time because I already worked out. But ideally, yes, I like the idea of the cold, hot contrast ending on cold. That's the best way to do it. So maybe you start with hot, maybe it's 15 minutes sauna, a minute cold, 15 minutes sauna, a minute cold, and then 15 minutes sauna, and then a minute cold, and you're done. I feel incredible when I do that. Again, what are you doing here? Cold vasoconstriction. Your body is going into this hunter's reflex where it shuttles blood flow away from the extremities, gives you this vascular massage, and supports your organs with blood flow. And then when you go into the hot exposure, the opposite happens, vasodilation, where you get the blood flow to your extremities. So doing that back and forth is amazing. You feel amazing. I feel amazing when I personally do it. I just don't do it as often because I tend to have a workout in there and I don't want to cold plunge after my workouts.
All right, Ben. Well, I know you've got a time crunch and you wanted 5 minutes between your next meeting. So let's spend the next couple of minutes just telling folks about, where to find you, websites, that type of stuff.
Yeah, Shawn.
Keto Kamp, whatever you want to share.
Thank you, bro. I love what you're doing, man. You've been a huge inspiration to me. I know I just interviewed you for my podcast and it's been a huge hit with my audience. It's an honor to be on your show and all the cool things you're doing. And I can't wait to see you in Miami so we can hang out here, do a in-person interview, maybe do a plunge and go get some steaks. Yeah. The main thing, bro, is my book, Metabolic Freedom. I'm really excited about it. It's 17 plus years of research. We have
May 13th that comes out, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, May 13th, 2025. I'm actually going into the studio for the next 3 days to record the Audible for it. So it'll be my voice for the Audible. And it's available on Audible, hardcover, Kindle, or it will be. And the book outlines my 17 years of research. For my podcast, I've done over 900 episodes and interviewed over 600 amazing people. And it's the synthesis of their research as well. And I've taken over 5,000 students through different protocols, done a lot of experiments on myself. So it's the synthesis of all of that. And I really wrote it in a way for people to understand the science in a practical way, and then most importantly, apply it. It's not the information. We hear information, knowledge is power, and that's not necessarily true. It's potential power. I always say if knowledge was power, then every librarian would be a skinny, rich, multimillionaire celebrity, right? It's not the knowledge, it's the application of the right knowledge if you understand it and could apply. And I believe I did a good job doing that in the book. And the book has endorsements from some great people in the space, Dr. Jason Fung, Megan Ramos, Dr. Daniel Pompa, Dr. Mindy Pelz wrote the foreword, Gary Brecka wrote an endorsement, and several other people I can't think about right now. So the book will be available May 13th, and we're doing something really special. If you order the book, I'm not sure when this interview is coming out, so it could be a pre-order or even when the book's out. When you order the book over at metabolicfreedombook.com, and you go to that website, you're going to order the book and then put your order number, email, and name, and then you're going to be sent a free gift. The gift is an entire course, 12 lessons on the metabolism that I developed, and there's exclusive interviews with Dr. Jason Fung, Megan Ramos, Cynthia Thurlow, Dr. Pompa, and Gary Brecka, only for those who purchase the book and get access to the free course. And it's free. All you need to do is go to metabolicfreedombook.com. That's where I would want your audience to go, whether you want to get it on Kindle, hardcover, or Audible. That's where you go, get the free course. And I would appreciate the support. And I think your audience is going to love the book as well.
So is it available for pre-order now?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and this will probably come out within about 2 weeks. So it'll work well within that
Perfect.
window.
So go pre-order it and they could get the course automatically with the exclusive interviews.
All right, Ben. Well, you want to get out here by 12:55 your time. I think we're just right on that. So thanks a bunch, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much.